Good morning, Revolution, everybody. Great to see you. Hey, Joe is back with us. Rosanna's on the road this weekend. Welcome, Joe, Anita, and Scott. Scott. Well, we
How's it
got a lot to
going?
talk about this weekend. We chaos in the Capitol. The House is without a speaker, and we're going to get into that. Uh, Honestly, I haven't figured out the whole thing. I'm curious. I want to know what the thinking sections of our movement have to say. Uh, then we're going to talk about what's taking place at the border. And finally, the strike wave gathering force 75,000 hospital workers, healthcare workers out on strike. I think this is the third day. And then finally, maybe a word or two about the Nobel Prize announced this morning. But first, um, Joel, McCarthy is history. Uh, is it because they turned up the bass too high and blew out the speaker? Is that the reason? Or are there other nefarious, deeper processes at work here? What does the
Ah,
narrative suggest?
yeah, that's a really great question. I think that the uh, Republican antics in Congress, in the House of Representatives, signal a more fundamental problem in the Republican Party. I think there's a growing section of that party loyal to Trump and disloyal to the sort of normative, abstract democratic process that uh, guides, you know, government institutions, is asserting, attempting to take over, right? And I think that the promotion of chaos, the promotion of disorder, the promotion of to, at the expense of the American people is part of their strategic aim, right? They want to prove their loyalty to Trump. They want to show that normative institutional processes don't work to accomplish their, frankly, terrible aims. So they promote chaos and they promote, disorder, to make it seem as though we need some sort of terrible person like Trump to step back in and create, you know, create order. So I think it's a fascistic tactic, frankly, and is very dangerous. And it says something sends a very serious signal to the American people, to the working class, to the voters, that we have to be on our guard and we have to watch out for what their next moves are, and to fight for broad unity for democratic to preserve democracy.
Anita, I read in the paper that they were meeting with Steve Bannon, the arch nefarious, crooked mastermind, so they say, behind everything fascist and evil in this country. I'm not sure if that's true or not. Um, and that they wanted to impose an even more stringent cutback uh, over and above the deal that McCarthy made back in June around the debt ceiling, if you remember that. Is that the reason that they were so opposed to Mr. McCarthy?
Well, Joe, I don't think it could be just Steve Bannon. I mean, Steve Bannon is one of the international right wing. He is behind some of the international right wing movements around the world. And I'm not surprised that he has his hand in this one. I think they are stowing chaos, and they claim that it's because of their fiscal responsibility. But all of the people who voted against, the eight Republicans who voted against Kevin McCarthy, claiming that they were concerned about fiscal responsibility, of those who were in Congress in 2017 or 2018, whenever that was, they all voted for the $1 trillion tax cut that Trump gave to the richest and Americans and the corporate elite in this country. So they increased the deficit, substantially over the course of the Trump administration, mainly with that tax cut. And then they want to turn around and say they're fiscally responsible. It's just a ruse for the chaos that they want to foment. And I agree with Joel, it's really dangerous because this just stirring chaos and creating disorder. We have they only have like 30 working days before we're at another brink of shutdown. So it's just they're really stowing chaos, and we have to be really vigilant to not let the country slip into something more fascistic certainly than we have now. Of course, we're not in a fascistic state now, but that's what they would. That seems to be the point of the disorder, which is frightening.
I'm really confused, Scott. Please clear this up for me. Joe and Anita are saying that the Republicans are sowing disorder. All they want is confusion. They're trying to, well, if that was the case, didn't the Democratic Party have the ability to restore order by voting for McCarthy, which would have kept him there? And wouldn't that have solved the problem? And so, is there like co-responsibility between the Democratic caucus in the House, led by Mr. Jeffries, and the Republicans? I'm
So
really confused. I don't understand what's happening.
there are a lot of questions swirling around about this. It's not an easy situation to parse at all. Um, and there have been calls from the sort of, I don't know, voices claiming to be moderate, um, calling on the Democrats to, why didn't the moderate Democrats rally to McCarthy to support him? They could have salvaged this situation. They could have, and I sort of think this is I think of that as a setup, really, an attempt to profit from this chaos in the House to drag Democratic legislators even farther to the right, to on the on the grounds of bipartisanship and order and whatever, the adults in the room, that was the phrase for a while under Trump, to provide cover for an even more rightward pull, because Kevin McCarthy was not in any way, a moderate. He was one of the most extreme voices in the Republican Party. So it is a big question. And another question that sort of poses itself for me is the relation between this whatever Freedom Caucus, this little group of Republicans that tanked McCarthy, and the backers of the kind of GOP and its fascist movement. So is this something where the reactionary section, most reactionary section of the ruling class is actively pushing these legislators, Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, et cetera, to do this? Or is it a situation where that section of the ruling class that backs the Republican Party has kind of lost control of its people, right? Is it, is Trump as well something that, got out of hand? And I tend to agree on that with Joel and Anita, that this is setting the stage for another push toward fascism. That, when we have crises like this, it is not the people in the working class that are in the best position to take advantage of them. It's the capitalist class. It's the sort of, billionaire funded astroturfed extreme right movement that I think is better poised, is going to come out the winner in this. But should the Democrats have saved McCarthy? I'm also not prepared to say that. So what are your thoughts, Joe?
You know, they're crazy. They're Gates is, but are they crazy like a fox, Joel? And isn't this and crafty as a fox too? And isn't all of this like a prelude to the election? I mean, isn't that behind? Aren't they like maybe setting? Because I was listening to the news this morning, Joe, and the main headlines were arguing based on a number of polls that have been taking place over the last several weeks that the Republicans are winning the debate around a whole number of issues, around the economy, around the border, around the Ukraine war, so on and so forth. So, aren't they subtly shaping their posture as the Republican primaries are beginning to move forward and maybe trying to? You say they're nuts, but are they really not? Because they're trying to influence the independent vote and peel some of them away. Could that be one of the objectives, Joe?
I think that that you're onto something there, because they want it not under the leadership of people that are considered moderate Republicans. They don't want it under the leadership of the folks that are willing to make political compromise with the center, who want the system to operate as it was designed to operate, to sort of mediate and to create compromise, but rather to push a very hard right Trumpian kind of concept of authoritarian rule, racist policy, anti-working class policy. That they want that to be under their particular control. So in the meantime, they want to foment a situation where the House of Representatives essentially fails to act, fails to continue the budget process the way it's sort of normally run, and to generate that outcome that you're describing.
I don't know. It's a funky situation down there in D.C. and a crisis of governability. And it may be, as we were saying last week, that old formula, that old Marxist formula, that the ruling classes are no longer increasingly unable to rule in the old way. They can't come together to find a solution. Even on economic policy, I mean, Biden and them have moved away from the neoliberal economic agenda towards a more Keynesian economic posture. But unless there's a new Congress, none of that's going to happen. And they're trying desperately to prevent that, Anita. Meanwhile, the Biden administration appears to be, moving back and forth. My neck is hurting, Anita, because one minute they move to the right, and then they move to the center, and then they move to the left, and I keep moving my head around, and I got a crink in it. Were you surprised, Anita, when the Democrats have been, pounding the table for 4 years about the border wall and Trump? It's a waste of money.
Mm.
Uh, it's anti-human. It's this, it's that. And then I pick up to turn on my computer, open up my phone yesterday, and then Scott calls me yelling in my ear that they're building the goddamn border wall, 20 miles of it, Anita.
I
Were you
know, I know. Scott, he's always, raising these alarms, but I think part of it is, I mean, it really is so disappointing that Biden has not found a way to not use these funds for the border wall. And I know that his administration is coming out and saying, well, the money is allocated. We tried to get it moved to something else, but can't get away. I can't believe that. I'm sure there was a way to not spend it on this particular thing at this particular point in time. I mean, we do have a crisis of human migration. Well, it doesn't have to be a crisis of human migration, but we have a lot of people moving across borders in this hemisphere. And I think the how the media framed this, I think they were. I feel like in The Hill and the New York Times were positively gleeful that they would have the opportunity to say that Biden was going against one of his promises. I just think this was sort of clickbait, for them. But I mean, it's still, and our tagline there says environmental racism at the border. The Biden administration did waive environmental concerns to undertake this undertaking, this border wall effort. So it's just it's really disappointing all around that they would do this, and that the media is just ready to foment dissension among people.
Scott, you raised the issue. What's your take?
Well, so
Some,
there,
neo sophisticated presidential triangulation efforts on the part of the strategists, the Machiavellian forces in the Biden administration?
Well, there is some evidence for that, right? Like, a couple weeks ago, he granted work permits to 500,000 Venezuelan migrants who'd arrived before the end of July. Now we're getting another section of border wall and increased deportations of mostly Venezuelans once again. So it's trying to get, it could be trying to get headlines out, that satisfy both people who want a more humane posture on immigration and hardliners. But I think the thing we really have to bring out about it is that is the question of imperialism and its consequences, right? The consequences of U.S. imperialism and capitalist globalization and war and military occupation are no longer contained within the countries where the damage is inflicted. They're flowing out as streams of displaced, suffering human beings. And this idea that the primary perpetrator of the processes that resulted in these migrations can just put up a wall and wall out the consequences. That's not how it works. And we could say a similar thing, in fact, about Haiti, where a UN military mission is about to go supposedly for peacekeeping, but in fact for likely violent suppression of any kind of popular movement. This is another situation where the U.S. has been interfering, meddling, and is now trying to suppress the results of it. And that's not, once again, that is not how it works. We need to, first of all, stop creating these situations, and then, accept our responsibility, deal in a humane, internationalist way with the consequences of those. But for that, it's going to require a big shift. Joe, you're always talking about radical reforms. At the least, that's what it's going to require.
Joel, I gotta go to the drugstore and buy me a 6-pack of Bengay because my neck really is hurting, man. Because one day the president is on the picket line with the UAW strikers. The next day he's implementing the Trump border wall. The day before that, he canceled student loans. Good thing. And the day before that, They're implementing the Trump policy prohibiting migrants from coming into the country at the border. You have to, either have a computer, which most of them don't have, or you got to have a cell phone, which most of them don't have, or you got to apply in a third country, and which most of them don't want to reveal themselves because they think that they're going to get deported back to their home country. So it's an impossible situation for them. But domestically, what does this say about the strategic objective of the Democratic Party with respect to who do they think is going to turn out for the election? I mean, is that what's behind this? Is it triangulation? Are they like trying to, as Bill Clinton used to say, capture the vital center? That was their favorite term, the vital center. Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, the shifting, moving vital center that appears to be moving right. I agree that it is a confused strategic orientation for the Democratic Party. But I think following up on Scott's assertions and tying it back to your earlier notion, is that U.S. imperialism is in a crisis that it's doesn't seem capable of extracting itself from. Right, the Democratic Party wants to appeal to a variety of so-called independent voters, right? This moving amorphous center that that's unpredictable at best, that they think are going to side with Trump and DeSantis and the fascistic elements in the Republican Party. But we're talking about immigration policy that historically has denied or restricted or obstructed or refused access to the United States by people who they see as not white enough to belong as citizens in this country, and that racist policies, reverberating today, and that's sort of the connection to that. But if we look at this problem, and we see that the United States policy seems to be only capable of operating in the world as an imperialist power, as a military force, or as an intervener in Latin American countries, initiating coups, establishing economic policies of sanctions and blockades that deny equal development and accelerated development, economic development for many countries, that create chaos, create repression and violence in many of those countries. People are fleeing those situations, and they don't really have any other place to go. And if we sort of grind our foreign policy down into just being this sort of violent perpetrator of U.S. capitalist interests, that process is going to continue. So American voters have to start to think about an alternative policy, right? Part of our United Front policy is we fight for equal access, and what they've created there is a massive human rights atrocity, concentration camps, imprisonment of children, denial of refugee status to people who are fleeing a desperate situation. And we're just not, we make this claim about human rights and democracy, and we just simply cannot. The U.S. ruling class, and when I say we, I mean them, because it's not us. The U.S. ruling class simply cannot bring itself to live up to those standards that it projects onto other people and punishes other countries for not adhering to. So, or in their view. So the contradictions are rampant, and our struggle is for democracy, not just because you have an American passport, but because you're a human being that deserves justice.
We need radical reforms, but without a working class movement, without a movement from below to push for those reforms, particularly on the issue of immigration, those reforms, modest or radical, are not going to take place. We need comprehensive immigration reform, and we need it now. And immigration is one of the issues with respect to the fight against racism that unfortunately, at least in my opinion, the Democratic movement has least traction on. Do you know what the president, former president, it wasn't my president. I loved it when we marched down the street saying, "Not my president," talking about Mr. Trump. He said the other day that he was talking about immigration, and this makes what Biden did all the worse. I don't know who those people are. They're coming out of insane asylums. They're criminals. They're drug dealers. They're they're poisoning our blood.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what he said. They're
It's right out
poisoning
of
our,
the
huh?
right out of the Nazi playbook,
Right
or
out of
really
Mein
right out of
Kampf.
Mein Kampf. And it's we do need that comprehensive immigration reform right now, but we're not going to get it, unfortunately. I mean, I just think it's going to take such a struggle to get to that point. And I think you're absolutely right. This white supremacist tendency against immigration from Latin America and from Africa is just really it seems to be ascendant right now. And it's just a shame. I think it's they know that the people who live in places where they're least likely to encounter a foreign-born citizen, or an immigrant, a refugee, those are the people that are most against immigration. And people in places where a lot of immigrants are living, we understand, and I say we because Columbus, Ohio, is really an open place for immigrants. We are this city has been revitalized by its immigrant and refugee community, especially refugees from Africa living in Columbus. It's just revitalized our economy. Just it's been a boon for everybody, for the whole working class, to have this influx of new Americans in the city. So I think it's the people who live in places where they can't see any immigrants. They don't know what they are, who they are. They're the ones that seem to be against this immigration reform that we could very easily have. And I'm glad Scott brought up Haiti and the effect from imperialism, and that's imperialism that goes back to the early 1800s, when the French demanded reparations from Haiti after it won its revolution. The French stole billions of dollars in today's dollars, billions of dollars from Haiti, and left them destitute. And now, what are they to do? They need help. They need place to migrate to equalize that situation. So it's I don't see a solution to this anytime soon.
But one of the solutions is growing working class unity, because this is a crisis on the one of imperialism, as Scott pointed out, on the one side at the top, but it's also a crisis in the working class, a crisis for working class people, working class migrants on the other. And the working class has to rise up to help solve it. And one of the great things, do you know that by the end of the year, some 300,000 workers will have gone out on strike this year, Scott? This is the biggest strike wave since the early 80s.
It's
And right now, we got the UAW on strike, and 75,000 healthcare workers at Kaiser Permanente going out for 4 days. Uh, and Scott, and not just them, 6 out of 19 work stoppages this year in shops with 1,000 workers or more happened in healthcare. You're married to a
Yeah,
health worker. Is she
yeah.
mad as hell and not taking it anymore?
It's the situation is simply not tenable. It's you have um, massive understaffing, which hospital systems will blame on the inability to hire people, but at the end of the day, they're the ones who are responsible for making sure there are enough nurses there and enough providers there to care for people. So in the hospital system where my wife works, to get in to see your primary care provider, the person who you're supposed to be able to, make regular appointments with, to, follow up on all your health concerns, that takes weeks, 2 to 3 weeks at a minimum, to get in to see your primary care provider. If you need to see a specialist, a dermatologist, endocrinologist, something like that, it could be 6, 8 months or a year sometimes. So and then there's pressure from the employer on the providers to try and stay late, fit extra patients in, cut other appointments short to squeeze more out of the day. It's clearly it has to do with the old struggle over the length and intensity of the workday. And in healthcare, more and more people are just realizing that it can't continue like this. It has to change. But this strike wave is a hugely positive sign, uh, both in terms of the mass ideological changes and the growing sort of general class consciousness, but also of the ability of the working class to organize itself and fight for its demands. That's what organized labor is, right? So it's the most organized and yeah, and most organized and most ready to fight, capable of fighting section of the working class, and this is pushing things forward. I really think that the election this time around is going to be very, very different in terms of the susceptibility to sort of interference by the extreme right, because I don't think, for all the differences there are between Biden and some folks in the labor movement, for all the disappointment about the PRO Act not yet being passed and all that, I don't think labor is going to sort of stand by and let this thing, let another fascist coup happen.
So we're in a new class struggle moment, a new populist moment, or would you describe it as a new socialist moment? What's your opinion?
Great question. I think for historical context, in 1919, the strike wave that occurred in the United States at that crisis year stood at about 15 to 20% of the entire working class. The entire workforce was involved in some sort of strike that year. So are we there? No. But I think that I would call it, hey, to add to your neck problems, let's call on the president to join the Kaiser picket line, because that is you made a bunch of excellent points, Scott and you, that this is a sharp point of conflict between workers and the capitalist class. Think about what it takes for a capitalist enterprise like Kaiser to refuse to pay its workers, to force them to work more, to understaff work in a workplace that is all about taking care of people, right? Taking care of sick, dying, or people in pain. And that just signals clearly to the entire world that Kaiser is really more interested in making money and creating value for stockholders than it is for caring for our family members, our aging parents, or our children with health problems. Not to mention the mental and physical well-being of the people who work in those situations. So how you can look at this situation and not demand a not-for-profit nationalized healthcare system is mind-boggling to me. But in this moment, fighting for workers who want good pay, who want to be able to sleep at night and enjoy their time off, and to live normal lives, right? That's not happening at Kaiser. And it would be easy for Kaiser to come back with a fair deal, a fair offer, and strike a deal with these workers. But they're resisting that, right? They want to control, they want power, they want authority over their company, and they want to create value for stockholders. So that's really sort of the crux of some of the most sort of destructive and dangerous and terrible aspects of capitalism that you can imagine.
Anita, class struggle moment, populist moment, or socialist moment, in your
When I
opinion, taking all of this together?
when I
Or none?
listen to Oh, sorry. When I listened to Sean Fain, the head of the UAW, speaking, I want to say that he is engaging in class struggle. He's talking about the billionaire class. And I noticed when I was reading about the Kaiser Permanente strike, I didn't see as much of that kind of rhetoric. It's about, short staffing and a lot of the workers' concerns. But Sean Fain is really, by taking the strike to all three of the big automakers, he is really, and in his rhetoric and in the kinds of um, conflicts that he puts out there as the reason for the strike, he really is setting workers against this billionaire class, and just claiming, and rightly so, that that there's no fairness there. They need their fair share of the profits and the results of the increased productivity and increased profitability of the big three automakers. So I think Sean Fain and the UAW is kicking it up into a new level of struggle that I think is class struggle.
It is not just Sean Fain, it's also the Teamsters, very militant posture, you know. Then you got to take the Starbucks workers and the Amazon workers, everybody. It's a very interesting developing situation that we have to dig into more. Let's do that next week, because I'm very interested in us digging into the different ideological political trends in the working class today. We need to. I just read there were two articles yesterday, one on white working class culture, and the other on anti-racism and its discontents. And so we need to put that into our basket and uncover what's taking place there. Because without greater unity, we're not going to be able to move this bad boy forward. The Nobel Prize was announced yesterday, and Nagris Mohammadi, I'm probably mispronouncing that, from Iran won. Congratulations to her. I asked a friend of mine, a good friend of mine from Iran, just this morning, what they thought. And here's what they said. They said, it's an important success for the Iranian people, this prize. It's a recognition of the struggle waged last year for the support for inside Iran, a recognition of the struggle waged last year to support the struggles of the Iranian people. She's campaigned for human rights and campaigned for this while being incarcerated by one of the most reactionary regimes in power today. She's a great campaigner who has managed to inform the world about the importance of supporting human rights and women's rights in Iran. And she has paid for her stance with many years of imprisonment. But today is her day, and the day for the Iranian women and people. And so, congratulations on that.
And
And then to
Joe's
close, y'all, to close, I just
I
heard
was gonna
Cornel West. Wait a minute now, I gotta say that. Go ahead, Scott. You're itching
okay,
to
I was
say.
saying the Nobel Peace Laureate is also an anti-war activist. In addition to all the work she's done for women's rights and women's equality and justice inside Iran, she's also has been active in the peace movement, especially under when George W. Bush was trying to stir up a war with Iran. She was very, very active in the demand for peace, which is, something that that's a movement that needs to be more present in our country. We need a peace movement, and we're working on that. So, yeah, back to you, Joe. Sorry, I just wanted to kind of plug the peace conference.
Very good. It's coming up November 11th and 12th. Next week, we're also going to have to dig into the presidential situation process. I just heard Mr. Cornel West, Professor West, now has abandoned the Green Party. First, he was with the People's Party. He hopped off of that. Then he hopped on the Green Party. I just call him Hop Along Cornel. Now he's hopping. He's running as an independent. He's left the Green Party. He's running as an independent. Now, I don't know how that brother's going to do that, Professor West, because in order to gain ballot status, you got to get at least 500,000 signatures around the country, valid signatures, which means you have to get more than 1 million because you got to double the number of signatures. You got like 200,000 or something like that in California alone. That's a whole heap of signatures. And you need an apparatus to do that. You need people, you need organization, you need money, and a whole heap of it. So we're going to talk more about that next week. Until then, stay strong, comrades. Stay safe. It's an interesting moment we're living in, really, isn't it? It's really quite. Stay strong, stay safe, stay in the fight, and stay interesting. See you next. Bye now.